Very good afternoon from Singapore and the Eastern Hemisphere, ladies and gentlemen. And a very good morning to all of you if you're joining us from Germany, Europe, or elsewhere in the Western Hemisphere. Welcome to our signature webinar today, which is a leaders' dialogue on how Singapore and Germany can work together to shape the post-COVID-19 world. This event is organized by Infineon, EDB, and SGInnovate. My name is Swee, and I'm the CEO of SGInnovate. We are a Singapore government-owned organization that invests in and builds deep tech startups, talent, and community. I will be moderating a discussion between Dr. Bae Suan Jin, who is the chairman of the Economic Development Board Singapore. I will abbreviate that as EDB, and Dr. Reinhard Ploss, who is the CEO of Infineon Technologies AG. Dr. Bae is the chairman of EDB and has been in this position since December 2014. For those of you who know Singapore well, you will know that EDB's role in the history of modern Singapore is singular. Prior to his role at EDB, Suan Jin was the permanent secretary at the Ministry of Law. In addition to his role at EDB, Suan Jin is also a director, a non-executive director of EDB Investments. He's also on the board of directors of my organization, SGInnovate. He's on the board of directors of Enterprise Singapore, Singapore Exchange, just to name a few of his very many appointments. Suan Jin was trained as a doctor, and so he's a real Dr. Bae. Not to say that the others are not, but yes, he's a medically trained doctor. Let me also introduce Dr. Reinhard Ploss. Dr. Ploss, engineering doctor, is the CEO of Infineon Technologies, which is a world leader in semiconductor solutions that enable smart mobility, efficient energy management, and the secure capture and transfer of data. In addition to his role at Infineon, Dr. Ploss is a member of the Senate of Acatech, which is the German National Academy of Science and Engineering, and co-chairman of the Working Group of Silicon Germany, among his many other appointments promoting Germany's technological competitiveness and strengthening EU-wide cooperation on key enabling technologies. As painful as the COVID-19 pandemic has been, it has also provided a unique opportunity for us to think about the kind of future we want. In Singapore, 100 billion Singapore dollars across 4 support and stimulus packages has been spent, with a significant portion invested to improve crisis response, to reskill its workforce, and to shape resilient manufacturing, trade, and supply chains. Similarly, Germany's 130 billion euro stimulus package is aimed not only at economic recovery, but also a more sustained and job-rich future through priority areas such as digitalization, quantum computing, sustainability, and low-carbon technologies. As our country is focused on rebuilding our economies, there are many fundamental reasons to be optimistic about Germany-Singapore collaborations. We begin by the fact that we have excellent bilateral relations, and this is reflected by the fact that Singapore is Germany's largest trading partner from Southeast Asia. Equally, Germany is Singapore's largest trading partner from the EU. Singapore is home to approximately 1,800 German companies. A large proportion of them are Mittelstands. And significantly, there have been recent German investments in Singapore, sizable ones, and these include Evonik. Evonik is a specialty chemicals company. It invested 750 million Singapore dollars in a second methionine plant. DB Schenker invested 150 million Singapore dollars in a new logistics base in Singapore. And at the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Infineon's presence in Singapore, celebrated yesterday, Infineon is adding an additional 27 million Singapore dollar investment to develop Singapore as its first global artificial intelligence innovation hub. This is in addition to over 700 million Singapore dollars invested in its Singapore operations over the past decade. We are very privileged, therefore, to have Dr. Bay and Dr. Ploss with us today. Not only will they provide us, respectively, with public and private sector perspectives on our discussion today, but they also embody the relationship between EDB and Infineon, which in turn exemplifies the best of public-private collaborations and the broader relationship between Singapore and Germany. So let's get started. Let's get warmed up. Swan Jin and Reinhard, why don't we begin with some of your brief thoughts on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the global economy and society. Shall we start with Swan Jin?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joy, for having me here. It's a particular delight to be on the same panel as Dr. Ploss. Infineon is a value partner of Singapore, and as you mentioned earlier, it's celebrating its 50th anniversary in Singapore. I think COVID-19, as many would have heard, has accelerated many underlying trends. We know about digitalization and how consumers, and not just consumers, but enterprises have rapidly embraced the use of digital tools and digital technologies at a speed that would otherwise not have been possible if not because of COVID-19 and the imposition that it has caused on all of us. So acceleration of trends is clearly one impact. But I would just say a second, suggest a second impact that COVID-19 has had on all of us. I think it's given us all pause to reflect on what's important for ourselves, but also what's important for society. And I do believe that out of COVID-19, many decisions, which again might have taken a little bit longer to come about, or we might have been a little bit more reluctant to change for the sake of change. I think COVID-19 will push us to decide in a different manner because of this period of reflection. So let me pause here so that Dr. Ploss can share with us his thoughts.
Yeah, very much also from my side. Thank you very much for this opportunity here, and hello to Dr. B. I think we can say Swan Jin is a very big pleasure, and thank you for the ongoing support. It's a very interesting time, and here I can basically agree with all what you said, but may add some flavors to it. This crisis is a kind of a pulse out of the normal doing. It is a huge opportunity, beside the fact that it's really for many people on this planet a very big challenge for just survival and economical existence. But it also gives us the opportunity to rethink what we are doing. The Greek word crisis means that is a challenging, a difficult situation with uncertain, let's say, outcome. And we have a huge opportunity to tailor the outcome. Tailor the outcome in many dimensions. One dimension is that digital, of course, is not a threat, can be a support. How can we improve on this digital and make our life better by using it? How can we use this for the sake of the improved living conditions on the planet, on a living way to live which is more in sync with the nature? All of these, and I really like this when governments, when everybody is saying, yes, we have to push, but this push must be for the better of all of us. And on the other side, I also like it because it has, I would say, energized the people to look at what they are doing and how they are doing. And I have seen a lot of ideas how to survive under these difficult bound times. And this is for me also very important, because if there is no initiation of a change there, then the people will continue as is. Just one word at the end. I think we should be very grateful that the digitization has progressed already. Think about a time 5 to 10 years ago. This COVID pandemic would have had a completely disastrous consequence. All of the office jobs, which we can do from home, and I would say the communications, which is possible. And therefore, we should think always about what can technology do and how can we use the technology for the good. So I think here, COVID we have to work through. We have to make sure that we do not, I would say, lose the people in the challenging times, but we should also use it as a crisis to turn for the better.
Reinhard, you've touched on some of the things I was going to ask you next on what the new normal looks like. So you've alluded to some of the features, certainly at the workplace, in terms of our ability to work from home, rather than to have a rigid requirement for people to be at the workplace. But what else do you expect to see in the new normal, and the changes that have been instigated because of the current pandemic? Do you think a year or two from now that we will slip back into the old ways?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. From my point of view, I believe that the people, and now we do talk about us as a company, but in general, the people at the very beginning were saying, oh, I can do everything from home. Now we see a lot of people in Infineon, and here at our headquarters in Campeon, we have provided some extra, let's say, setup with a tent and whatever, that people can come together. And we see that people, after some time of using all this, I would say, digital tools, say, this is not the life I want to have in future. The people are looking for a hybrid life. We are social elements, and we want to, let's say, experience social interaction, the smile from you at, say, to your colleagues, this 5 minutes of discussion when you enter the room, solving a lot of these issues. So I believe this will be completely different than we had at the beginning of the shutdown and we had before the shutdown. And this will be a long journey of learning how to use it best. We also will see that the technology will evolve very quickly. Today's digital interaction is, for me, still not human. There is no emotion coming over. The majority of the microphones flatten your speech, the same level all the time. You cannot be angry, you cannot be delighted. All of this is a lot which we need. On the other side, interacting with customers. We see that our customers who traveled a lot now have much more time, especially in the engineering space, to have in-depth discussion. So much more productive. And I would say here, we have not thought about the ideas which will come along the way. And this is a topic where I very much count on SGInnovate. How can we have a human-machine interface which is really allowing us to have a human-like interaction? If this comes, then I believe more will be. But again, I think we will have both of us. A lot is not yet invented.
Thank you. And Swanjit, what are your thoughts? I mean, let's, in relation to international trade and industry, for instance, what does the new normal look like for you?
Well, the one obvious change that jumps out would be how supply chains need to be reconfigured. just putting aside US-China contestation, COVID-19 showed that if any company is dependent on a supply chain that is, for instance, located just within one country, they could be very vulnerable to shutdowns, to export controls, and other interventions that previously they would not have had imagined. So the need to diversify supply chains to built-in resilience, I think clearly is here to stay. The phrase that everyone is using is moving away from just in time to just in case supply chains. So I would start with that. I think the second that perhaps we may because it's happening around us and we may not pay too much attention to it. It's just the sheer amount of churn within industries and changes in how which companies are going to become the leaders and the winners, and which companies which used to be the leaders will actually start to deteriorate in their competitiveness in the post-COVID world. I think that's also something that, when we eventually emerge, we might well see a corporate landscape in many industries that's going to look very different. And then, of course, I mentioned about the acceleration of digitalization. I think Reinhard said it very well, that if this had happened 5 to 10 years ago, I think the economies would have been crippled much more badly than what it is today.
Well, Jin, since you mentioned resilience in supply chains, what is Singapore doing to strengthen these supply chains, to augment our resilience of our supply chains?
Well, at two levels. One, of course, we are looking critically at our own essential supplies and what we need to do to build resilience. And the ultimate source of resilience is actually diversity. So it's about making sure that we have greater diversity in where we source our essential supplies. And of course, where possible, we would like to have some of those activities take place in Singapore. I think one thing that is a big positive coming out of COVID-19 is just how everyone in Singapore has been reminded about the value and the importance of having manufacturing capabilities and competencies within the island. So that's one level. The second level is more about how Singapore, together with the rest of Southeast Asia, can play a bigger role as companies reconfigure and reorganize their supply chains to build resilience and to build diversity.
Dr. Ploss, Reinhard, how are you building resilience at Infineon?
So it was a very important remark by Sun Jin, the topic of resilience. First of all, for Infineon, it's extremely important to understand what is the threat coming up. How is it looking like? How can we get our arms around? How can we understand? Here, I fully agree. There is not a solution that you now put everything around you. There's also not a solution to, let's say, to put everything to another country. And here I think what we are doing is we try to understand how the complex system of supply is and identify those areas which needs action. So that you have in the supply chain certain opportunities to switch quickly between factories, between suppliers, and having a good understanding what this means. But also here, this, I would say, idea of just-in-time or lowest level of inventory. I think if you have tightly coupled system, you have somehow built in flexibility. You have to build in thinking of a buffer stock, having capabilities in order to would say, react to demand. And there is also a very needed approach to be able to think ahead. Where do you and how do you see the next wave of problems coming? If you only want to react when it is there, it is pretty late. So you need kind of a radar system which detects the upcoming challenges. And I think there are upcoming challenges with the geopolitical tension coming tighter there. I think we cannot easily prepare for all the crisis types we have now. There, you have to have a set of reactions in the drawer. And this is what Infineon does. We create or we think about scenarios. Then we prepare for those scenarios that we can do it in an instance. On the other side, it's very clear. Semiconductor is very expensive and very capital intense. You cannot have two factories, one idling and one running. So you have to balance between efficiency and more highest productivity and resilience in the system. Here, maybe this is also a topic which we can think of, that in the area of SGInnovate, we do not only think about products, we also think about ways and solutions and computer systems, how to solve that and how to handle those. The wisdom behind maybe a substantial innovation which can make a substantial difference in the future.
Reinhard, let me just continue along that train of thought. I mean, one of the things that has made Infineon Singapore so special has been its collaboration with EDB in the automation of your production line, which I understand, I mean, compared to some of the other Asian locations, this is the most automated line that you have. And obviously, this was a decision that was taken many years ago. Probably you had not even anticipated a pandemic. But nevertheless, the automation of the production line clearly has mitigated some of the effects of the pandemic. And it's interesting. I mean, what was some of the considerations back then? I mean, was it driven? I mean, it's a big decision to make to automate a production line. What were some of the motivations or imperatives at that point in time when that decision was made, which has now proven to be quite prescient? Yeah,
well, it's quite some time ago, and I think here are several factors. First of all, we recognize that, if we continue in the way we are doing it, is not very sustainable. It's not sustainable from the point of quality, from the point of cost, from the point of productivity and technology complexity. These were somehow problems popping up. On the other side, when you think about Singapore, then Singapore is an environment where, due to what's Dr. B said, is you always know that with the way you do things today, you will not be successful tomorrow. Singapore is a think ahead of time place on that planet. And this, of course, enables these discussions, invites these discussions. How will be a highly manufacturing-oriented setup factory look like tomorrow? How can you maintain this in Singapore? How can we even change the game? And especially the last one, how can you change the game? The dialogue which we have is EDB on that as a constant thing is quite fruitful. This idea that we have started artificial intelligence, innovation, and investment in Singapore is, I would say, not recent, it's old. But it's something where together with EDB, we were thinking about what might come. And even get the support in this investment into what might come. And I think that is extremely important, to have an environment which is not sticking to the old, is inviting to the new. And also the setup of the SGInnovate. The idea innovation is not anymore something which is only in startups or only at large corporations. It is a network issue. This also was supported very effectively by Singapore. So here, this idea how we have been changing our manufacturing concept in total. I also like the discussion I had with Swan Jin about we need different leadership. You cannot have the old leaders saying, oh yes, please go to the machine, do this and that. We need a completely new leadership style. It's an invitational. You have a job, please think about how you do it, how you use your tools around it. This evolution is as important as the technology evolution. And we got it happen with the support of EDB, and I also like what was said yesterday and what also was said today by Dr. B, is it's a matter of changing the thinking and cultural capabilities of people.
Oh, that's not easily done. Swan Jin, you want to shed some light, some of your thoughts on culture?
No, it just came to mind a phrase that a former boss of mine, a former chairman EDB, used to say, which is, when you change in good times, you get to change in good time. And I think that's exactly what Infineon did, which was really to look at what they needed to do to transform the manufacturing shop floor. And when COVID-19 hit, then there wasn't any panic, there wasn't any desperate measures to be able to keep the operation going.
So that's, yes. I mean, to be constantly evaluating the sort of the long-term viability and sustainability of your operations, whether or not you're in a crisis.
That's right.
Thank you. Swan Jin, EDB launched a campaign, a video campaign, Dear World.
Yes.
Really quite a very compelling series of videos. You've touched on it earlier, but could you expand? I mean, from the video, I mean, what is Singapore's plan for the future economy and society in the light of what has happened?
Thanks, Jay, for mentioning that campaign that we launched. Actually, it was very much driven by, firstly, hopefully a rallying call for people in Singapore and also friends around the world, that we have to keep our eye on the ball, that COVID-19 is not over, but at the same time, really preparing and working together and preparing for the eventual upturn that will come after COVID-19. So it was both hopefully a rallying call, and at the same time that we have to stay open, we have to stay connected, and we have to work together in order to emerge stronger. So it wasn't a particular, a very specific call for action about, let's please do this or please do that. It was a much more general message that we wanted to convey. In Singapore, we don't have a lot of resources. We have a very, very, small physical country. So clearly some of our sectors, like the aviation sector, the travel-related sectors, have been hit very bad. There isn't even, significant domestic tourism to give it that support the way that, let's say, domestic tourism is helping the Chinese economy. But despite that, we have to rethink and really reimagine how things could be and quickly pivot accordingly. And this really does require everyone to be bold. Of course, not to be reckless, and to be, whatever moves we take, it has to be informed by science, by data. But this is not the time for the faint-hearted. So in a way, it is very much a rallying call that we have to keep our eye on the ball, despite the continued bad news. And by working together, we will eventually emerge stronger.
Thank you, Swan Jin. Reinhard, yesterday at the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Infineon's presence in Singapore, Infineon showcased a company called Sixth Sense, which happens to be one of our portfolio companies, and which is working with Infineon to develop a failure analysis platform for smart manufacturing. Infineon also signed an MOU with us, with SGInnovate, to build your connections with Singapore deep tech startups. What is the motivation or imperative that is leading you to want to work more closely with startups?
So Infineon is a very innovative company. On the other side, we do not have all the ideas you can think of. Very often, you are caught by your mindset you have developed over time. Startups come very fresh. It's like a white sheet of paper, a green field approach. When they come in and say, well, I have an idea, let's do it this way. Then first of all, we can say, maybe, and let's think about it and try out. And giving them the opportunity to test if this has a real value. And together we can harvest the value. Also, these startups then have the opportunity as a proven use case to go out and go much larger than we do. And here, a lot of things where maybe Swan Jin can comment on this. The biggest innovation when looking back, in between a senior person, but there was a big wave on innovation when engineering and the medical sector came together for the medical equipment, ultrasonic, nuclear, and many other scanning systems, and. All of these brought a completely different thinking from an engineer, and at this time, a completely not fitting thinking of the medical doctor. Over the time, they got closer. They developed the language together. But the message is, very often, knowledge and thinking from completely different sector can be very beneficial, but it takes time to align and think about and come together how to make it. And we believe and we expect that people, either with a fresh mind addressing the thing, coming with experiences from another field, can be extremely substantial to change the game. And here, for me, we have several dimensions of innovation. It is a game-changing one. Doesn't happen so often, but many industries live from the incremental innovation. When I do things a little bit different, when I look at our shop floor and as highly automated it is, a lot are small bits and pieces. And after 20 of those, you have something completely different than before. So we value both. But again, if you do not change the thinking, innovation is always very difficult to initiate. I like what Swan Jin says. You have to think ahead in good times. And this is the next topic where I like SGInnovate. You do not think from a threat. You think from an opportunity. And this changes the mindset of the people completely and make them enthusiastic for what else could be done. And here I see huge potential.
In addition to the, to the discussion on Sixth Sense, yesterday you also signed MOUs with Institute of System Science and AI Singapore. So you're building a whole ecosystem of collaborations. Now the MOUs with the Institute of System Science and AI Singapore look like they're trying to address talent issue, and probably is related to some of the comments you made earlier about culture change. Would you like to elaborate on that? What is the background to wanting to work with AISG and ISS on talent?
Well, I think the way or the reason why we want to collaborate was very clear. We believe that SGInnovate is a great source of new ideas, a lot of energized people who want to make a change, and the environment which also with the Arise which we have set up, I believe in making things easy. I have learned this from EDB. EDB is always, what can I do for you in order to make your life easier? How can I orchestrate things in a way that we do not a monster of bureaucracy? And this is what we also want. This is, I would say, this you just pressure a button and you know how to cooperate. The startup should not be frightened by working together with a big corporation. Yes, they should know there are rules, there are good stories around, and Infineon is supporting them for the better of both sides. And that's, I think, here very important, and it's also a mindset for Infineon within, because here it is about, I would say, having a good future for both of us. And therefore, I like this institution, because you do not do everything from the scratch. It's like, I will call it, I would say, these new instant coffee machines where you put in a pad, press a button, and you have a fantastic coffee. That is, I think, how the environment of SGInnovate can help us to move forward.
Now, what you say reminds me of, I spent some time in EDB as well, and there was another corporate leader who once compared EDB to Drano. If there's an obstruction, apply a little EDB and it goes away. But Infineon in many ways is a bit of an outlier. Yeah, collaborations are not. I mean, you've been very proactive about these collaborations. These don't happen that much else. Well, I wouldn't say it doesn't happen, but Svante, what can we do to promote, to grease the wheels of collaboration, system-wide?
No, so this is actually an advantage, and I think an often overlooked advantage of Singapore. The fact that we are so small, it does mean that people can connect very easily, very quickly, and very frequently. And it's only in recent years that we have taken advantage of this little known strength of Singapore. And it has allowed us to connect large corporates, companies with large operations here, with the very, very vibrant startup ecosystem that we have built up. And equally important, it's not just about big and small, innovators with companies with a huge installed base, but also between companies across different sectors coming from different disciplines. Reinhard spoke about that earlier, collaboration between healthcare and engineering. And let's say in agri-tech right now, it's between biotech and food technology. So this ability to foster innovation across disciplines, across sectors, fostering innovations between large corporates and small and startups and frankly even SMEs is a huge advantage that Singapore has. Two new factors that hopefully will propel our innovation scene even further along. I think we can't pretend that it's not happening, which is actually the flow of capital that's coming into Singapore because of partly because of COVID-19, but also because of the changing global order. There is a strong desire from owners of capital, managers of money managers, risk capital coming into Singapore, and it is actually a huge opportunity to connect this to the many entrepreneurs, to the many companies that are operating here, because this can actually really accelerate these companies to fulfill their potential. The second new factor, it's the role of government. I think the Singapore government, in many ways, partly driven by COVID-19, but partly also because we are embracing innovation for how we intend to direct the economy. We believe that government can play an important role, first by being a smart user of technology, by being a bold user of technology, but equally, how can we be a smart regulator? I'll give an example, an announcement that just came out today, which is that Eat Just has the record of the company that has the first alternative protein grown from cells approved for use in Singapore. And it is thanks to the Singapore Food Authority, who really invested a lot of resources to study this topic, that actually is taking this very bold step to allow for the use of alternative proteins grown from the lab to be used in food. So this is an example of the sorts of moves that I think smart regulation can take that will help innovators in Singapore and around the world.
Well, Jin, you talked about being a smart user of new technologies. Are you able to give some examples that technologies that have been rapidly adopted at the government level for use?
Maybe I can talk about mobility and how LTA, our Land Transport Authority, working together with us at EDB, we went out for a very thorough process. First, a request for interest, and then subsequently a request for proposals to develop and eventually launch 3 pilot programs where we will have autonomous vehicles operating in Singapore, and not just a few vehicles doing it as a trial. Our intention is to have 3 precincts whereby the autonomous vehicles will be running and actually taking on paying passengers. Now we will start first with fixed routes, fixed schedule, which is a lot more is a lot easier to organize, and then eventually, of course, moving to on-demand services. But this is an example where hopefully by being a smart user, we can help accelerate adoption of some of these new technologies.
Thank you. Let's move on to let's now talk a little bit more at a broader level about growth and collaboration for Singapore and Germany. Reinhard, what are some of the growth opportunities that you see possible between Singapore and Germany? Things that are unique to both Singapore and Germany that we can capitalize on.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and Swan Jin, I think, highlighted quite some. Singapore, due to its small size, and there's this being small is an advantage, can very quickly say, let's try this. Let's set up the boundary conditions for, as mentioned, the LTA, the transport system. When you would do this in Germany, it's much more complex. You have a lot of people to talk to, worries and the rest. So we believe that innovation is kind of, if you have a ball on the table, it will not move, but you can tilt the table. You can, I would say, higher one side or lower the other. One is the demand, and the other is, I would say, the idea about what else can be done, so the push. Here, Singapore is a great place to be in order to try out things. Because when you think about innovation, you have 2 valleys of death. The first is you have a great idea, but to kind of making the first prototypes. This is the first valley of death. The second valley of death is you have prototypes, but typically they are, I would say, too expensive. Now comes the stage of basic industrialization. So you have to provide enough use case to create the pull for it. So now the question, it doesn't matter where it comes from. Does it come from the idea or from the need? But you get it going. Singapore is a very great place to try it out, be open for this, being well regulated and orchestrated. The other point is German engineers, very often people say we are slow. I wouldn't call us we are slow. We are thoughtful. Because especially when you think about what you say, an automated car, well, it doesn't matter if your smartphone breaks from time to time, you reset it, or you get enough new software. But I don't think you want to have the first car on the road being said, yeah, well, please take care when it comes towards you. Maybe it's not in full in control. You want to have 100% dependable. So we are great in high quality, thought through concepts. And at the same time, we are very interested in trying out new ideas. Singapore, also a lot of innovative people, thinking out of the box people, and ability to, I would say, provide an environment where this can be try it out in a very intelligent way and say, well, it works. Now let's make it in larger scale. So these are areas where I believe we can synergize very well. On the other side, we also see that, and here I think Europe has to accelerate the digital thinking, the fun of these topics. It's bigger in Singapore, in Asia, than it's many part of the, here, I would not say it's bad here. In Infineon, we have a lot of these thinking and thoughts, but nevertheless, from the society, it's slightly different. So we appreciate this opportunity to move on. Therefore, I believe we can synergize in many areas, the way how we work, the boundary conditions given. I like very much the environment EDB is providing in this topic of invitational cooperation. You cannot just say cooperate. If you say, please come, let's come together and for a coffee, let's discuss something, bringing industries together. This is also a very big strength of Singapore, which is not so easy here in Europe. I think here what Dr. B said is absolutely key for us. So we have this collaborative environment, which we believe, and we have a lot of technology we can try out and bring over there.
Jin, how about you? What do you think are some of the growth opportunities that the two countries can work on together? You've mentioned autonomous vehicles. I mean, are there other areas?
Well, firstly, just on this point about German-Singapore collaboration, for all of us to come out with from COVID-19, vaccines will be a big factor. I thought I should just take this opportunity to actually point out that one of the earliest vaccines coming out will be the Pfizer-BioNTech. So everyone knows Pfizer, but BioNTech is actually a German biotech startup. So I think the world will have a lot to thank Germany for. If the vaccine works successfully, and as I have full confidence that it will. And so I want to first point this out, not unique to Singapore, but I think many of us will really rely on this partnership with Germany to emerge from the COVID-19. Okay, back to your question, Joy. I think very simplistically, I would say that German hardware and software or digital in Singapore is a very powerful combination. I think Germany is very well known for the engineering capabilities, as Reinhard said, very thoughtful engineers. And in a way, I think Singapore, because of the unique location we are in, the vibrant digital economy that's happening here in Southeast Asia, our ability to attract the best from China, the best from US, has actually created a very strong tech talent base here that companies like Infineon and other German engineering companies can tap on. And working together, I think we can develop even better solutions that address the needs of customers in this part of the world and around the world. So very simplistically, hardware from Germany and software from Singapore. I think a second, very specific area has to do with, again, the growth opportunities from the diversification of supply chains to Southeast Asia. It will create a lot of opportunities for the German Mittelstand companies in particular. Their strength in industrial machinery, industrial automation, Internet of Things. I think they will find that they have much to offer. Many companies are already here, but many more should actually make their way to Singapore and to Southeast Asia to pursue this opportunity. So maybe I'll just highlight this too. I mean, I have a dream, which is that more German automotive companies will do more R&D and manufacturing in Singapore. But today they are quite well entrenched in China, and we'll see if we'll be able to move some of those activities to Southeast Asia, to Singapore, with the advent of electric vehicles becoming a much more dominant platform.
I'm so glad you mentioned vaccine, something, because we've spent so much time talking about digitalization. Sometimes we forget some of the more analog technologies. And it also, Reinhard had also made reference to the interface between medicine and electronics. And, that could potentially also be an area that two countries taps on each other's strengths.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to spend the last few minutes to share some of the questions that the audience has. So I think we have about 9 minutes left. We can probably do about 3 questions. So my first question is from Dr. Maren Celine Schweitzer. And her question is, please share your thoughts in respect of open innovation related partnerships. What aspects did or might evolve in post-COVID times? Who would like to take a crack at that? Open innovation related partnerships. Reinhard, would you like to?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. For me, it's very clear, I said at the very beginning, there will be a substantial demand for human-machine interfaces, be it either for the way how we do automation, but even more how we interact. So the current system is for me okay, but it's not really capable enough in order to completely change the game as we act. This would be one area to think about how this could look like, how this should be established and especially also tried out to familiarize, because great ideas need to be good ideas. And at the end of the day, innovation here is important. But this is only one example. The other example is we as a company are very much standing in for the environmental idea. And here the request is, how can we develop innovation in order to improve the use of resources? And now not only in, I would say, optimize it in a resilient way. So that is hardware, software based to do things. These are 2 domains which I believe have a huge potential. I always like to think from what can it be good for, and is there a real need? And there is a need.
Thank you. Let me move on to another question, and perhaps Swanjin can take this one. This is a question by Felix Tan, and he asks, as Dr. Ploss has correctly mentioned, reacting to a problem is usually too late. So with the democratization of information, how can governments around the world come up with policies given how quickly things are changing? I suppose the question is, how is government reforming in order to more quickly address crises or new situations?
Yeah, it's not easy, and I really don't think that any one government can have the answer. The need to be agile is clear. And I think in Singapore and some parts of the government, I think what we are coming to terms with is to borrow a page from the software industry, which is, in the past, it used to be about the development kind of in the, I'm not a software engineer, but the waterfall wave of developing products, right? I mean, you basically pass it on from one so-called department to the next department, and you roll out the product and you're expecting the product to be perfect, right? So in the past, I would say governments would develop policy that way. When you roll out the policy, you expect it to be perfect, and you're defending it in a very insistent manner. But actually, could we imagine developing policy the way that, let's say, an app developer develops their apps today, right? Which is to put out a policy which is about 80% there, but as we get feedback, as we get, as the policy hits the ground and hits reality, we can actually adjust and tweak some of the details because we are getting real world information and real world data. So it's difficult to put in practice because sometimes the policies are delivered through legislation, but where policies are delivered through through services and other forms which make it more possible to make tweaks along the way. I think that will be the direction that, at least for some parts of government, we will do. Because honestly, with the pace in which change is happening, the pace in which technology is developing, it will be very difficult to get it right first time.
Of course, that's predicated on the the ability to collect the data and then the ability
Absolutely.
to rapidly analyze the data.
Correct.
I have a question from Stephanie, no last name provided. Maybe both of you can very quickly answer this question. This will be our last question before we wrap up. And hers is a very good question. Her question is, how can we better balance inclusivity and sustainability as we pursue innovation for greater growth? I think we might have talked about sustainability, so maybe let's focus on inclusivity.
I'll give it a shot, and I alluded to it at the start of my remarks, which is that COVID-19 is a time for personal reflection, and also a time for reflecting on what is important for society. And inclusive growth, about not leaving people behind, really has become very important, and COVID-19 has underlined how some segments are doing better and other segments are doing worse. And how do we want to address this issue in a post-COVID world? So I do believe that we have to think hard about job creation. We have to think hard about how do we make sure that resources are given to those who need more help. And of course, for Singapore, a big principle, a very important principle in how we intervene to assist those who are disadvantaged is also not to take away the sense of dignity, the ability to self-help and to be self-sufficient. It's finding that right balance. But I can assure everyone that this is a very important issue, not just for Singapore, obviously, for governments all over the world, as we can see from the politics in those countries. We are taking this very seriously, how to have inclusive growth, even as we seek to emerge stronger and more competitive post-COVID.
Reinhard, any follow-up question?
Yeah, very briefly. I think here, first of all, we have to, I'd say, as leaders stand in that there is something which is important to us and for the company. We have to add this as a value to what we do. We have to showcase it and prove to the people that we do. And this is something which is appreciated in total. So also linking those groups in the society who stand in for it, who say, we want to have that. So we should think about how to connect it. And very often also tell the people about the stories which were leading to a better life. And I think here there are many, but very often they are not voiced very clearly. And the digital, I would say, step up which we are doing offers a huge opportunity for inclusion. There are a lot of people on the planet who do not have the opportunity to say adequate education. The digital platform will allow many more people to higher level education. And this is a global inclusion, and I would say even for those who have different boundary conditions. And this will be extremely important, I believe, is a huge area to do, and Infineon is very much interested, and we are very committed to support all of these areas.
Thank you, Reinhard. As we draw to a close, can I just invite each of you to just give one key message, one takeaway as we rebuild our economies and societies. Reinhard?
So rebuild the societies. I think here it is not so easy to rebuild a society because the human beings, I think change is often seen as a threat. So we have to talk about the opportunities, a new way of doing things have to us, and create showcases. And here definitely the collaboration with Singapore is very positive to that the people are not saying, oh, it's a threat, it's an opportunity, I like it. And with this, I think putting in all the environmental and societal effects which are important, having, and we didn't talk about it, a world of data which is trustworthy and trustful. All of these is something which we have to come together and think about how we can do it. Nobody can do it alone. And this is, I'm looking forward to join next economic forum in Singapore again in order to debate this. How can we work together to contribute and make a difference?
Thank you. Swanjin, any takeaways?
Yeah, well, I suppose, you know, we all talk about reimagining the future post-COVID. I would say, don't just reimagine it, reinvent. So don't just dream, do. Because I think this is the time for action, and this is the time for bold action.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to bring this discussion to a close. Thank you all for joining us at this Leaders Dialogue on how Singapore and Germany can work together to shape the post-COVID-19 world. And of course, thank you, Dr. Ploss and Dr. Bay, for your time and to sharing your insights. Building Singapore's deep tech ecosystem is a big part of what we do at SGInnovate. And next week, we are hosting the Deep Tech Summit as part of the Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology. And I hope you guys will come and join us. And on that note, farewell. Have a good day ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Reinhard. Thanks, Jay.
Ciao, Swanjin.